The security scanner beeped 3 times. Marcus Chen froze mid-step, his hand still extended toward the crystalline bowl of what the translator had called starfruit nectar. Around him, 200 alien dignitaries turned in perfect unison, their movements synchronized in a way that made his human hindbrain scream danger. Queen Velsera of the Crithani Dominion sat at the center table, her forearms motionless, her compound eyes reflecting the banquet hall's bioluminescent chandeliers. She hadn't moved, but every royal guard in the room had shifted their weight forward. Marcus had attended exactly one interstellar diplomatic function in his career as CEO of TerraCorp Mining. He'd been told the invitation was an honor. He'd been told to smile, eat what was offered, and under no circumstances touch anything marked with the crimson spiral symbol. The bowl he'd reached for had no such marking. But the scanner disagreed. "Step away from the table, human." The voice came from his left, a Crithani warrior whose carapace bore the deep purple of the royal guard. Her translation implant made her words feel like they were being carved directly into his skull. Marcus withdrew his hand slowly. His heart hammered against his ribs. 200 pairs of eyes, human, Crithani, Veltorian, and species he couldn't name, remained locked on him. "I apologize," he said, keeping his voice level. "I didn't see any warning." Not a good sign, according to the cultural briefing packet he'd skimmed on the shuttle ride over. "The Queen's food is not marked," she said. "It is known." Sweat beaded on Marcus's forehead. He'd been hungry. The previous 3 courses had been decorative fungi that tasted like burnt plastic, and the nectar had looked like the only thing remotely drinkable. He'd assumed, incorrectly, catastrophically, that a bowl placed so close to the general seating was fair game. Queen Velsera finally moved. One slender arm lifted, and the entire hall went silent. Even the soft chittering of the Veltorian delegation ceased. "Bring the human forward," she said. Marcus's legs went numb. The royal guard gripped his shoulder, gently but with the promise of iron beneath, and guided him through the maze of tables. His dress shoes clicked on the polished stone floor. Somewhere behind him he heard Ambassador Williams inhale sharply. No help would come from Earth's diplomatic corps. He was alone. The Queen studied him from her raised platform. Up close, her carapace shimmered with embedded gemstones that pulsed in rhythm with her breathing. Her face was inscrutable, a mask of chitinous plates and ancient authority. "You are Marcus Chen," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, Your Majesty." "You oversee the extraction of minerals from the outer colonies?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "And you came to my banquet. For what purpose?" Marcus's mind raced. The invitation had been nonspecific. TerraCorp had recently won mining rights to 3 asteroid belts in neutral space, pending approval from the Dominion Council. This banquet was supposedly a celebration of the new treaty between humanity and the Crithani. He'd assumed his presence was ceremonial. "To honor the alliance," he said carefully. "And to—" "You came for the food." The hall erupted in clicks, whistles and sounds Marcus's ears couldn't properly process. The Queen raised another hand and silence fell again. "The scan detected your biometric response," she continued. "Elevated cortisol, depleted glucose levels. You have not eaten today. The previous courses weren't compatible with human digestion. So you reached for my personal reserve?" Her compound eyes seemed to fracture the light, creating a kaleidoscope effect that made Marcus dizzy. "Do you know what that bowl contains?" "Nectar," I thought. "Harvested once every 17 years from the blooms of the sacred gardens. This particular batch was prepared for the signing of the Treaty of 9 Suns 3 centuries ago." She lifted the bowl with 2 hands, holding it aloft. "It is worth more than your entire planet's yearly economic output." Behind him, he heard someone, probably Williams, mutter a curse in 3 languages. "I didn't know," he said. "I apologize sincerely, Your Majesty. I meant no disrespect." The Queen tilted her head in a way that reminded Marcus of a praying mantis examining prey. "You are the first human to attend this banquet," she said. "Your species is new to the galactic community. Mistakes are expected." She set the bowl down. "But intent matters, Marcus Chen. The scanner reads not just your physical state, but your emotional truth. When you reached for this bowl, what were you thinking?" The question caught him off guard. The truth felt too simple, too embarrassing. But lying to a being who apparently had technology that could read his emotional state seemed suicidal. "I was thinking," he said slowly, "that I'd sat through 4 hours of speeches I barely understood, eaten food that made me nauseous, and just wanted something to drink that wouldn't make me sick." A sound emerged. Low, rhythmic, almost like laughter. "Honest hunger," she said. How refreshingly simple. She gestured to the guard. Bring the human a chair. The chair arrived within seconds, a low, curved thing that adjusted to his frame as he sat. The queen studied him across the small table that separated her throne from the general seating. The bowl of nectar sat between them, glowing faintly in the dim light. 300 years ago, the queen began, a Veltorian ambassador reached for this same bowl at a similar banquet. He claimed diplomatic immunity when challenged. Do you know what happened? Marcus shook his head. I had his family's mining operations seized, his house exiled from the council, and his name struck from all records. He had reached for the bowl not from hunger, but from arrogance, from the belief that his status elevated him above protocol. She lifted the bowl again, her movements deliberate. But you, Marcus Chen, reached for it because you were hungry, because you are a creature of simple needs placed in a complex situation. She extended the bowl toward him. Drink. Your Majesty, I can't. You already reached for it. The offense is committed. Refusing now would compound the insult. Her eyes glittered. Drink, human. I want to see if your kind can even taste what you so carelessly sought. His hands trembled as he accepted the bowl. The crystal was warm, almost alive in his grip. He raised it to his lips, aware that 200 beings watched him consume something worth more than Earth itself. The nectar touched his tongue. The world exploded into sensation. It wasn't just taste. It was memory, emotion. Time itself condensed into liquid form. He saw the gardens where the flowers bloomed, felt the age of the treaty being signed, understood in a flash of impossible clarity the weight of 3 centuries of peace held in this single vessel. He lowered the bowl, gasping. The queen leaned forward. Tell me what you tasted, human. History, Marcus whispered. Then she made a gesture with her upper left hand, a movement the cultural briefing had never covered. Every Chthoni in the room stood and placed one hand over their primary heart. You have honored the nectar by understanding it, the queen said softly. Few species can. Fewer still admit it. She took the bowl back, drank from the same spot his lips had touched, and set it down. The Veltorian ambassador tasted only sweetness. He had no capacity for reverence. Marcus's mind reeled. He'd somehow passed a test he hadn't known he was taking. Your company seeks mining rights, the queen continued, voice returning to formal tones. TerraCorp has been aggressive in its expansion. Some on my council believe your kind lacks respect for the ancient places, the sacred spaces between the stars. We follow all established protocols, Marcus said carefully. Protocols written by those who taste only sweetness. The queen's mandibles clicked in what might have been approval. But you, Marcus Chen, who came to my banquet hungry and honest, who reached for something precious without knowing its value, you tasted history. That suggests your species might yet learn wisdom. She gestured to the royal guard. Bring the child. Marcus's confusion must have shown on his face, because the queen's compound eyes seemed to soften. You will understand, she said. The guards parted, and a small figure emerged from a side entrance. A Chthoni child, perhaps the equivalent of 7 or 8 years old, with a carapace still soft and pale. She moved with the uncertain gait of youth, her 4 arms held close to her body. She approached the queen's table and stopped, looking up at Marcus with eyes that held infinite curiosity. This is Valkyra, the queen said, my youngest daughter. She has been studying your species. The child clicked softly, and Marcus's translator struggled to keep up. You are the one who builds machines that eat stone? We mine asteroids, yes, Marcus said, unsure of the proper protocol for addressing Chthoni royalty who weren't yet old enough to vote. The asteroids in the Kelnar belt, Valkyra said, her voice gaining confidence. You want to mine them? That's correct. But those asteroids are where the singing stones sleep. The singing stones had never appeared in any briefing document, any geological survey, any treaty negotiation. I'm not familiar with... Of course you aren't, the queen interrupted. Because they are not stones as you understand them. They are living organisms, billions of years old, that communicate through crystalline resonance. Your surveys would classify them as valuable mineral deposits. Our culture recognizes them as the oldest living beings in this sector. The weight of her words settled over Marcus like a physical thing. The Kelnar belt is sacred, Valkyra added, her young voice carrying absolute certainty. Mother says you want to break the stones apart and sell them. Marcus felt the room's attention sharpen. This wasn't just a test anymore. This was the real negotiation disguised as a child's curiosity. We didn't know, he said honestly. Our surveys showed mineral deposits of exceptional purity, We had no indication of biological activity. Because you didn't know to look, the Queen said. Your science is advanced, but young. You see resources where we see relatives. If we'd known, withdrawn your claim, forfeited billions in potential profit. The Queen's voice held no accusation, only genuine curiosity. Would TerraCorp truly sacrifice that much for beings you cannot speak with, cannot trade with, cannot even properly detect? Marcus thought of the nectar, of the taste of history. He thought of the child standing before him, waiting to see if humanity would choose wisdom over wealth. Yes, he said, we would. Valkyra's mandibles parted in what he'd learned to recognize as a smile. The Queen, however, remained motionless. Prove it? Your Majesty? Your company has 17 other mining claims in neutral space? Surrender one of them. Now, here, in front of this assembly. Show me that human honor extends beyond the reach of human hunger. Marcus's breath caught. She was asking him to give up assets worth hundreds of millions, to make a decision without board approval, without legal counsel, without any guarantee that this gesture would matter. But he'd tasted history in that bowl. And he'd seen the look in a child's eyes when she spoke of singing stones that her people considered family. The Valdris Cluster, he said, his voice steady. TerraCorp relinquishes all claims to the Valdris Cluster, effective immediately. We'll file the formal paperwork within the hour, but consider it done. The Queen's forearms moved in a complex pattern. The guards responded by striking their chest plates in unison, creating a sound like thunder. The Valdris Cluster contains deposits worth 3 times the Kelnar Belt's estimated value, the Queen observed. I know, Marcus said, but the Kelnar Belt is where the singing stones sleep, and apparently the Valdris Cluster is... He paused, realization dawning. You're testing me again. Always, the Queen said, and this time her mandibles definitely formed a smile. The Valdris Cluster is barren rock, worthless except to species who insist on claiming everything they touch. She gestured to Valkyra. Explain what you have learned, daughter. The child stepped closer to Marcus, her pale carapace catching the light. Humans are scared, she said simply. You reach for food because you're hungry. You claim asteroids because you're scared there won't be enough. You move fast because you're scared of being left behind. She tilted her head. But you also taste history. That means you can learn to be less scared. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. This child, barely old enough to understand galactic politics, had just articulated the core fear that drove every human expansion into space. We are scared, he admitted. Our planet is small. Our resources are limited. We've spent centuries fighting over scraps, and now we're in a galaxy full of ancient civilizations who've had millions of years to establish themselves. Yes, we're scared. Then why reach for my mother's bowl? Valkyra asked. That was more scary than staying hungry. Because sometimes, Marcus said slowly, working through the thought as he spoke, being honest about what you need is less frightening than pretending you don't need anything at all. The Queen looked down at her daughter. Some wordless communication passed between them, carried in the subtle shift of mandibles and the precise angle of their heads. A Kelnar Belt is yours, the Queen announced, but you will mine it under Chthoni's supervision, with biologists trained to detect and protect the singing stones. Your profits will be reduced by 40%. Your operations will be subject to immediate shutdown if we detect any harm to the living crystals. And you will accept Valkyra as your cultural liaison. Your daughter? She is 17 solar cycles old enough to begin her diplomatic training. She finds your species fascinating despite their numerous flaws. This arrangement benefits both our peoples. Valkyra's eyes brightened with something that looked remarkably like excitement. I accept the terms, Marcus said, before his rational mind could catalog all the ways this could complicate operations. On behalf of TerraCorp, we welcome Chthoni oversight and Her Highness Valkyra's guidance. The entire assembly rose with her, creating a wave of movement that rippled through the banquet hall. Then let it be recorded, she declared, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, that on this day humanity demonstrated the capacity for wisdom. Marcus Chen reached for sacred nectar and hunger and found reverence. He surrendered claims and fear and found courage. He spoke truth when lies would have served him better. She extended one hand toward him. The Dominion recognizes TerraCorp as a worthy partner in the development of the Kelnar Belt and humanity as a species capable of growth. Marcus stood and accepted her hand. Her grip was firm, her carapace cool against his palm. Around them, the assembly erupted in sounds of approval. Clicks, whistles, harmonics that his translator gave up trying to interpret. You will attend dinner with my family tonight, the queen added quietly, meant only for his ears. Valkyra has questions about human mining equipment that I am not qualified to answer. Also, you need proper food. You are still hungry. Marcus realized he was, in fact, still starving. The single sip of nectar had satisfied something spiritual but had done nothing for his very physical need for calories. I would be honored, Your Majesty. As the guards escorted him back to the human delegation's table, Marcus caught Ambassador Williams' expression, a mix of horror, awe, and grudging respect. Do you have any idea what you just did? Williams hissed. Honestly? Not entirely. You just negotiated the most favorable mining contract any human company has ever received, while simultaneously establishing cultural exchange protocols, demonstrating human adaptability, and apparently befriending Krithani royalty. William shook his head.
And you did it by accident, by reaching for the wrong damn bowl.
Valkyra was watching him, her young face bright with interest. The queen had returned to her throne, but her attention remained fixed on the human delegation. Sometimes, Marcus said, echoing the child's earlier wisdom, being honest about what you need is less frightening than pretending you don't need anything at all. Marcus forced down 2 more courses of fungi that tasted slightly less like burnt plastic. Other dignitaries approached to offer congratulations or veiled warnings, depending on their political alignment. A Veltorian trade minister made a pointed comment about humans who rise above their station through theatrical displays. Marcus smiled and said nothing. But it was Valkyra who appeared at his elbow just as the formal proceedings concluded, her small form radiating barely contained energy. Mother says you must come now, she announced. Family dinner starts when the third moon rises, and you are very slow at walking. Marcus followed the young princess through corridors lined with living crystal that pulsed with bioluminescent light. The palace was less a building and more an organism, grown over centuries into its current form. He understood, suddenly, why the Krithani viewed the singing stones as relatives. Their entire civilization was built on symbiotic relationships with living minerals. They arrived at a chamber far smaller and more intimate than the banquet hall. A round table sat in the center, set with bowls and plates that seemed to have grown directly from the floor. The queen was already seated, along with 2 other Krithani whose carapaces bore the deep purple of the royal bloodline. My eldest daughters, the queen explained. Velkasha and Velmorin, they wished to meet the human who reached for history. The 2 older princesses studied Marcus with expressions he couldn't quite read. Velkasha, whose carapace bore intricate patterns of gold inlay, spoke first. Our mother believes you made your choice from wisdom rather than calculation, she said. I am less convinced. Humans have a reputation for adaptability that borders on deception. Kasha, the queen said, voice sharp. It's a fair question, Marcus interjected. Your Highness is right to be skeptical. My species is new to galactic politics. We make mistakes. Dub. We act from fear and call it strategy. He met Velkasha's compound eyes, but I didn't reach for your mother's bowl as part of some plan. I was hungry, and it looked drinkable. Everything that followed was me trying very hard not to cause an interstellar incident. Velmorin's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. At least he's honest about his inadequacy. Honest hunger, Valkyra added helpfully, settling into a seat beside Marcus. That's what Mother called it. The queen gestured to the table. Eat. This meal is prepared for omnivorous digestion. You will not become ill. The food was strange. Crystalline vegetables that crunched like apples, protein that tasted like a cross between fish and mushroom, grains that sparkled with embedded minerals. But it was edible, even pleasant. He ate with the focused intensity of someone who'd been running on empty for far too long. Valkyra watched him with fascination. You eat faster than our scholars predicted. Let the human digest. But I have questions. After he's eaten, the queen said firmly. Marcus looked up from his plate, suddenly aware that the entire royal family was watching him consume their food with the same intensity they'd shown during the banquet. He slowed down, wiped his mouth, and set his utensils aside. I apologize, he said. I haven't eaten in nearly 20 hours. Why? Velakasha's tone suggested this was further evidence of human irrationality. I was nervous about the banquet. Didn't want to risk any digestive issues during formal proceedings. So you starved yourself to maintain dignity, Velmorin observed. Yet you reached for the queen's nectar in front of 200 witnesses. Yes, Marcus admitted. Humans are frequently contradictory. The queen's mandibles parted in her now familiar expression of approval. Continue eating, Marcus Chen. My daughters can interrogate you once you've regained your strength. The princesses asked questions. What did humans do for recreation? How did they choose their leaders? Why did they insist on giving their ships names like Intrepid and Valiant instead of practical designation numbers? Marcus answered as honestly as he could, aware that every word was being analyzed for insight into human psychology, human weakness, human potential. It was Valkyra, though, who asked the question that changed everything. Why do humans want so much space? She said, her young voice cutting through a conversation about Earth's political structure. You have one planet? We have 17 worlds. The Veltorians have 43. But humans act like they need to own everything they see. Why? Marcus set down his fork. Because, he said slowly, we nearly destroyed our one planet. We fought wars over resources, poisoned our air and water, drove countless species to extinction. We reached space not as explorers, but as refugees fleeing the consequences of our own greed. He met Valkyra's curious gaze. So yes, we want space. We want resources. We want to spread out so we never again face the possibility of total extinction from our own stupidity. But you are still greedy, Velkasha said.
You just have a better excuse now?
Yes, Marcus agreed. We are still greedy. We're trying to be better. But fear makes us grab for things we don't need, claim more than we can use, expand faster than wisdom would suggest. He looked at the Queen. That's why your test mattered. You gave me a chance to choose differently, to see past the fear. The Queen inclined her head slightly. And will TerraCorp see past the fear when you return to your board of directors and explain why you surrendered a valuable mining claim for access to a belt full of restricted zones and cultural liaisons? Marcus smiled despite himself. They're going to be furious. Then why make that choice? Because Valkyra asked me to prove humanity's honor, and I remembered what the nectar tasted like. He picked up his glass, filled with something that sparkled like champagne but tasted like starlight. Sacred things matter. And if humanity is going to survive in this galaxy, we need to learn that some things are worth more than their mineral content. Valkyra beamed. Velmorin and Velkasha exchanged glances that suggested Marcus had either passed or failed some test he still didn't fully understand. The Queen stood, signaling the meal's end. You will return to Earth tomorrow, she said. Valkyra will accompany you in 3 cycles, once her diplomatic preparations are complete. She will live among your people for 1 solar year, learning your ways, teaching you ours. At the end of that year, we will evaluate whether TerraCorp has honored its commitment to the Singing Stones, and if we fail, then the Kelnar Belt returns to Dominion control, your company loses all mining privileges in neutral space, and humanity earns a reputation as a species that talks of honor but acts from hunger alone. The Queen's eyes glittered. But I do not believe you will fail, Marcus Chen. You tasted history. That changes a person. Marcus shook it, aware that he'd just committed his company to a year of unprecedented cultural integration, reduced profits, and the constant presence of an alien princess who seemed to find human technology endlessly fascinating. Thank you, Your Majesty, he said. For the meal, for the chance, for treating my ignorance as an opportunity rather than an offense. Thank you for being hungry, she replied, and honest enough to admit it. As Marcus left the palace that night, escorted by royal guards back to the human embassy, he pulled out his datapad to begin composing the message that would either get him fired or revolutionize humanity's approach to interstellar resource management. He started typing. Dear Board of Directors, I have good news and complicated news about the Kelnar Belt mining operation. His fingers paused over the screens of the palace windows. He could see the 3rd moon rising, the same moon Valkyra had mentioned, the one that marked the beginning of family dinners in the royal household. Somewhere in that ancient structure, a young princess was probably asking her mother new questions about the strange human who had reached for sacred nectar and found something more valuable than mineral rights. Marcus finished his message. We're going to do this differently. Not because it's profitable, though it might be. Not because it's easy, though it won't be. But because a child asked us to prove humanity's honor, and for once, we're going to try. 3 months later, when Valkyra arrived on Earth with a delegation of Chthoni scientists, the board had reluctantly approved the new operational protocols. TerraCorp's stock had actually risen on news of the cultural exchange program, with investors betting that unprecedented access to Chthoni technology would offset the reduced mining profits. But Marcus remembered what mattered. a bowl of nectar that tasted like history, a child's question about human fear, and a queen who'd given humanity a chance to be better than their hungers. He met Valkyria at the shuttle bay, where she emerged with eyes wide at her first glimpse of Earth's blue sky. "Welcome," he said. "I hope you're hungry." "Always. But this time I know which bowls to reach for." Marcus laughed, and somewhere in the space between species, between fear and wisdom, between hunger and honor, humanity took its first real step toward belonging among the stars.